Good evening, and welcome to our third topic meeting. This evening is on community amenities. Before we move into our formal presentation, I'd just like to do a few housekeeping items and then some brief introductions. In terms of housekeeping, we have here a sign-in sheet, our presentation if you'd like to follow hard copy format, and also another handout on one of the boards, which is the Community Amenities Board. If anyone here would prefer Spanish translation, Christina over here does have some headsets and can conduct the meeting in Spanish. We also have childcare this evening. Childcare is being provided by our Community Services Department and is just right out the door here in our Community Services room. There's some refreshments over here on the side as well. Please help yourself. With some introductions here this evening with us, we have a number of staff resources. We have our Assistant City Manager, Chip Taylor. We have our Community Development Director, Linda Heineck. We have an Assistant City Attorney, Lee Prince. We have Jim Kogan, our Housing and Economic Development Manager. I am Deanna Chow with the Community Development Department. Here on our, representing some of our GPAC members, we have Vince Bressler and Harry Bims, and from our Planning Commission, I do see John Kibani. So with that, I will introduce Debbie Schechter with PCRC, who will be help facilitating our meeting this evening. And not to forget our consultant team from PlaceWorks. We have Charlie Knox, Rosie Dudley, and from BAE, David Shiver.
Thanks, Deanna, and thanks everyone for coming out tonight. I know it's been a busy week with a lot of meetings for a lot of you, and we really appreciate you taking the time to be here tonight to give the city your input on the topic of community amenities. So just wanted to find out who has been to any of these meetings before, any of the Connect Menlo meetings, if you could raise your hand. And it looks like there are a couple of folks who haven't, so I'll go through my usual introduction. So I'm Debbie Schechter. I'm with the Peninsula Conflict Resolution Center, and I have Kay Crawford, who's also a volunteer with PCRC, who is here, who is going to help me out. And PCRC is a nonprofit based in San Mateo County. We are a communication and conflict resolution agency, and we partner with a number of the cities in San Mateo County to help engage residents in issues that affect them. And what we're doing here is partnering with the City of Menlo Park to engage the community in the Connect Menlo process. And my role here is to help the meeting run smoothly, make sure that everyone feels like they can contribute, feels comfortable sharing their ideas, and feels respected, and that the process runs smoothly. And you all and the city are the content experts here, so that's what we want to hear about from you, is what you think about the content of what's being discussed today. So we are here today. We're here today to talk about community amenities portion of the proposed the zoning requirements for Connect Menlo. And so what we want to do, what the city would like to do, is to give you more detail and background on how the city and their consultants came up with the process for providing community amenities for Connect Menlo, and get your input on that. And as part of that, the city would also like to hear from you about what you think about the affordable housing requirement that is part of the community amenities portion. So this is our agenda for today. It's also posted on the wall over there. We're in the welcome and introductions portion of it. After I finish with my introductions, we'll go into presentation. And the city and their consultants will talk about community amenities, affordable housing, and they will describe how they came up with the approach for determining developer contribution to community amenities. After that, we will have topic stations, as we've done at the previous meetings, if you've been at those. And the topics are community amenities, affordable housing, and developer contribution methods. And we'll encourage you to rotate among the stations as you wish. to ask questions of city staff and consultants, and to put your comments on comment cards. After that, we will come back into the large group for a summary and some questions and final questions and comments, and then we'll talk about next steps. I think I already went over our meeting objectives. Group agreements, if you all have been at any of the meetings that PCRC has run, you know that we always have group agreements. Again, this is a tool that we use to help our meetings run smoothly and to make sure that everyone feels like they can contribute and feels comfortable doing so. Again, our group agreements, which are up here and appear for your future reference, are speak one at a time, speak respectfully, listen for understanding, speak from your own experience, knowing that we all come from different places and each have our own experience. Let the facilitator guide the process, and then please silence any technology that you may have on you. So can folks agree to follow those agreements this evening? Yes? Looks like some people can. How about everybody? I see some more heads nodding. Great, thank you. One more thing before I turn it over to Charlie. We also will have another station where you can put other comments. There. So I wanted to note that. And then there are several items that you may have picked up on your way in or that might be at your tables. I just wanted to make sure that folks know what you have in front of you, so you have a copy of the presentation so you can follow along if you like. There are index cards and pens on the table, so when we break into the stations, we'll be encouraging you to post those. And I also would say feel free as you're listening to the presentation to write your questions on the cards, because we will be taking the questions at the stations, not during the presentation. And then finally, you received some dots when you came in. And again, I'll explain at the end, but we'll be getting your priorities for community amenities, and so that's what those dots are for. What did I forget? Nothing. Okay, with that, I'll turn it over to Charlie Knox for the presentation.
Thank you, Debbie. Welcome, everyone. Nice to see some new faces, too. So I'm just going to briefly cover in a few minutes where we are in the Connect Menlo General Plan update and M2 area zoning update process. This chart shows the process started in 2014. A lot of you were involved in creating guiding principles that have framed our discussion for the last 2 years. It's hard to see on this slide, but basically we've gone through the development of land use and circulation elements. We have drafted the zoning provisions to implement them, that is to make them a reality, especially here in the M2 area, Belhaven neighborhood. And we're now nearing, now we're in the spring of 2016. And what's really different about this map, this chart, since you've seen it, is just to show you this item here, which is a piece of the process that was added over the last several months to go into much greater detail about what's in the zoning, what's in the proposed rules for land use and development in the M2 area, specifically with regards to design and the way development can be done, green building and sustainability standards, and that's been the subject of the last 2 meetings we've had here at the Senior Center over the last few weeks. And now tonight we get to what are called community amenities, which basically comes down to, if we're going to have new development in the area, what's it going to provide for Belhaven, what's it going to provide for the rest of Menlo Park. And if you recall, going all the way back to the City Council's direction to staff and our consulting team when we began this process, the premise of the whole process was, if we're going to allow more development than is currently allowed under the general plan and the zoning in the M2 area, it will be because it will bring benefits, amenities to Belhaven, and to generate revenue citywide, and have Menlo Park become a bigger player in the economic prosperity of the region. So one of our guiding principles was corporate contribution, and that has led to general plan language, policy language, that then leads us into the zoning, where we have development standards and requirements to provide amenities. The corporate contribution guiding principle looks like this, and it basically says more or less what I just said. In exchange for new development potential, we're talking about contributions to things like jobs, housing, schools, libraries. neighborhood retail, etc. So the guiding principles are up there behind Debbie if you want to take a closer look at all of them. So we've talked in the last few meetings about what's changing. There are new zoning districts proposed for the M2 area, basically between 101 and the Bay here in Menlo Park, and allowance for what's called bonus development. So there's a certain amount of development already allowed in the general plan and the zoning ordinance as they exist now. The idea would be more than that would be allowed in exchange for providing these amenities. Taller buildings, more square footage, more housing. So the summary of the community amenities program is the city grants this bonus development, right? And developers provide the amenities as desired by the community. It's an incentive for economic activity here in M2, and it's based on the landowner and the city sharing the benefit of having this new increased bonus level of development. Again, the idea is to provide these amenities directly here in the M2 Belhaven area, with the exception that the idea that housing, below market rate housing, if it's allowed or provided as an amenity, could exist in other places in the city. We've heard a lot during this process about the concentration of housing in Belhaven, in the M2 area, and this is one of the amenities where people thought maybe that's something that can happen anywhere in Menlo Park, not necessarily just here. And then there's also, just for one piece of information, some projects may be too small to provide any certain thing that the community desires, and in that case, it may be appropriate for the city to collect money to try to fund that, as opposed to having the developer or project builder themselves. So here are some of the basic frequently asked questions that we've gotten over the last 2 years. How are these requirements determined? Can developers just build whatever they want, or what would they build? When is that going to happen? And when we talk about affordable housing, how much is the right amount? And what type? So I'm going to try to answer those questions as we go through the next few slides. So there's a list, next to Kyle back there, there's 2 boards, and this is where we'll go, one of the stations we'll go to after this brief presentation. And these are lists of amenities that were developed through the Belhaven Vision Plan process that PCRC was a big part of going back several years, and then brought into this Connect Menlo General Plan Update process. So these are the ideas that the community, especially Belhaven residents, have really coalesced around. They are listed both in the form of the various surveys that we did during this process, and then with some blank space next to them on the board to the left, where you'll be able to place dots tonight. It's basically a voting exercise to say, we've got a certain amount of money, how are we going to spend it? What are the most important things to spend it on? We have various workshops, numerous ones, and a survey that was both online, on paper, in English, and Spanish. And we received almost 200 of those surveys, and a lot of those people, the majority, identified themselves as Belhaven residents. So we feel like over the last couple of years, we've gotten really good input on what really are the things that the community wants to see. And again, tonight is another opportunity for you to take a look at that list. If you see something missing you think is really important, you can add it. There are places to write your comments, and you can also use the dots you're going to get to vote for the things that you think are most important. And there are cost estimates provided up there that either I or David Shiver from Barry Economics over here can explain. So I've circled here high quality affordable housing because that's one of the key community amenities that was talked about. And in fact, we had specific discussions just about this item, including in front of the City Council about 6 months ago, I'd say. So there's been a lot of questions among those frequently asked about housing. And so the summary about housing, first citywide, the city has a below market rate ordinance that basically says projects that are going to provide 20 or more units of housing have to include 15% of those at what's called a moderate income level or lower. I'm going to show a slide in a minute that puts the dollar amount so you get an idea of what moderate income means. And so commercial developments in the city right now of 10,000 square feet or more will pay an in lieu fee. And what that is the city's collecting money to try to fund the building of more units below the market rate. And that's just the numbers of what the different kinds of development in the city provide. So we had a lot of questions about the income levels and Belhaven in particular. So what the slide shows you is that, first of all, the citywide median household income based on the latest data is significantly higher than here in Belhaven, which I think everyone knows intuitively, but here are numbers for you to see. And then the breakdown in these are the categories that are set by the state for our housing element. And so when we say moderate income, this is the number. And you can see that the moderate income number in Menlo Park, which averages somewhere up of above 100,000, might well go towards the median citywide household income, but is almost double what you see here in Belhaven. So as you look at these statements, the low, very low, extremely low, moderate, these are the numbers to back them up. And I think one takeaway from the slide is that in Belhaven, 50, almost 80% of the community is in households that are considered low or very low or extremely low income compared to the rest of San Mateo County and the city. So the proposed requirement for the M2, the proposal we're talking about tonight, that's part of this community amendment. Thanks. Sorry about that. As part of this community amenities discussion is that 50% of the units that are in these bonus level projects be at the low, very low, or extremely low income levels. So again, that is from this kind of average of $65,000 income and below. And that in addition to that, bonus development, whether it's residential or office or life science, can also provide similar housing at lower levels. So the idea in the zoning that we're talking about tonight, the community amenities, is first of all, 50% of the units in the bonus residential projects. So when you've gone from this base level that's allowed now to the new additional level, anything you provide in the way of housing, 50% of those housing units will be available to the very lowest of the income groups. In addition, any development can also provide the affordable housing at that level as an amenity, either here or elsewhere in the city. And so one of the questions that we've kind of had before us is, does that make sense to people? Are you comfortable with that arrangement? Do you think that we should do something else? And so we have a whole separate station on affordable housing and just those questions over here as we go around between stations. With that, I'm going to turn it over to David. I'm going to turn it over to David Shiver, who's from BAE or Bay Area Economics, and he's going to take us through this discussion of what are the different options for turning the new additional bonus level development into community amenities. Thanks. And why we've proposed a certain approach here that we think might be appropriate for Belhaven and Menlo Park.
I say to keep this going, you don't press the mute button. That's the trick. Sorry, Charlie. My name's David Shiver, principal of BAE Urban Economics, and I thought I'd do a brief introduction to this concept of community amenities and how it works and what it means from an economic. Red light's flashing. Should I just? I'll just speak. So what this shows is how you look at the economics of a real estate project, like the kinds you're talking about over here in the M2 district. So a real estate project, looking at the base case, you have a land cost, the property owner acquired the property, and there's some value to the land. There's the cost of all the materials, the labors to build the structure. There's costs called soft costs, which are the design costs, fees, pay, taxes, financing, all the things you have to pay for to get a project built on a site. And then the owner and the developer are hoping that they make a profit on that project. And so when we look at these community amenities, we're talking about how does the city's granting of extra bonus development change the profile of these boxes. So of course your costs go up, the profit as a percent goes up, and then you get what's called a residual profit, the profit of that's really due to the increased density that's allowed by the city in return for community benefits. So a lot of what the issue of, well, what's the value? How do you know what the value of community benefits are? You're really looking at what is that extra level of profit? How do you measure it in a way that's consistent and a stable kind of number?
Does this work? Yes. So in the current plan for the M2, we have proposed a new way of looking at how to value community amenities. And so what we're proposing for your consideration and feedback tonight is that an appraisal process be used. Because in effect, there's two holders of the rights to develop. One is the owner of the property who bought it, and they have the base level of development that they're entitled to build. The other holder of development rights is the City of Menlo Park, which can grant, at its discretion in return for community amenities, additional development. And we feel that an appraisal process is more true to what's actually going on, which is that the city's providing additional development rights, and it should be, the value should be priced according to how much more development you're adding. So we're looking at an appraisal process that says, well, what's the value per square foot of this bonus development? So it's X square feet of commercial space, or per unit of residential. And the advantage, we think, of this approach is that it accounts for the extra density, the location, the kind of construction that's being proposed on the property. You pay this at the time you're doing your building permit review. It would be paid for typically in kind through construction of amenities by the developer, or in monetary if not. And we are proposing a developer contribute half of that value, 50% of this per square foot of extra bonus development. And so that's in a nutshell the proposal that we're laying out for consideration. So there's been a lot of different ways of computing this, and I thought I'd give everybody an opportunity to kind of look at how is this being done now and in the past, and what's different about the way we're proposing it. So Menlo Park itself, and a lot of other cities, I did, okay. Thanks. So to give you an example of our method, let's say we have a 3-acre lot in the M2 area, and the base entitlement allows you to build about 65,000 square feet. That, assuming about $150 of value per square foot of building area, would make the land worth about a little under $10 million, $9.75 million. So that's kind of the base value and the base development. Now, through an exchange, the city granting additional development rights in return for community amenities, the owner of the property can now build 20,000 extra bonus square feet. When you apply the price of about $150 per buildable square foot, you get a calculated value of about $1.5 million. And then we propose that be half of that amount would be in the form of community amenities. So this just gives you a mathematical example of how this concept would work. And we think it's pretty simple to apply, because you know how many square feet are allowed, you know how many square feet you're granting, and you would do an appraisal to figure out, well, what's that per square foot value number going to be. Now I'll go on to the next slide. So there's really 3 kind of traditional methods of valuing this. First, and the city's been doing this, and part of the general plan update process is to revisit how the city's been approaching community amenity evaluation, is it's just a case-by-case negotiation. You sit down, you look at a pro forma that the applicant or developer or property owner provides, and we, as consultants like myself, would be doing an analysis to figure out, okay, what's that extra profit or value that's created by the extra density, and you negotiate what the community amenities will be and their value with that developer or applicant. And that's how it's been doing. And it's case by case. The value can go up and down according to the market cycles, which you would expect. The other method of doing this is in Menlo, the city of Mountain View just has taken this approach. There's a flat fee per square foot based on looking at kind of a typical project. You might come up with a rate that you just simply apply to every project for its increased density. And some of that's simple to administer because it's just a number, $20 a square foot, and it's predictable. You know what it is when you're applying for your permit. Some of the drawbacks to that is it doesn't really adjust. If you don't update your spreadsheet analysis to come up with a new number, you may be providing disincentives for development if the market changes or values go down. It doesn't really account for project specifics, as every parcel is different, every project's different. You want to be able to account for that. It's very sensitive, as is the negotiation method, to what you're assuming in your economic analysis. These economic analyses have many, many variables. What's the cost of the land? What's the cost to construct? What are the costs to design the building and to pay all the permits? What are the investors going to value this building at when it's done? All these things, small little changes in these assumptions can have big differences in the value you get at the end of the day. We're trying to look for a method that would avoid that. Some other methods have been percent of profit. So you would, again, do a spreadsheet analysis, and then you'd say, okay, we'll take 50% of the extra profit in this project in the form of community amenities. The benefit of this is it's somewhat predictable because you know at the end of the day you're going to have X, you're going to take a percent, and it adjusts to the market as conditions change. But it also is very highly sensitive to all the assumptions you make about all the things associated with this development and the development as an investment. So our approach, when we're kind of comparing it to the other ways of doing it, which are more traditional ways, is it's not really based on a spreadsheet. It's based on what do people actually pay for land and development rights in the general area of Menlo Park. So it's really based on actual sales that have been occurring in the marketplace. You don't have to complete a complicated pro forma that's highly sensitive to what you put in as an assumption. And you can structure your appraisals to ride with the market. So if, right now we're in a boom time, well, when that changes, you can then reset it through an appraisal process to come up with a new value. The drawback to this is appraisers are always kind of looking backwards to see, well, what have things sold for? And so there you might have, when you're going up, the value might kind of go up a little more slowly than the market is. But when it goes down, it's the opposite. It might go down a little slowly because you're looking at the last year's or the last few months' sales, not what's happening necessarily today. So that's one drawback. And then if you do look at an area, like the M2 area, you would have an expense of periodically having to reappraise the values so that you make sure that you're not disincenting folks from asking for the higher level of density in order to get the community amenities. So who does these various methods? So we've made a little slide to show what cities have been engaged in community amenity programs. And there's a lot of cities, and we didn't put them all up here, but we just put a few. So in terms of negotiation, Menlo Park's been doing it for its El Camino Real and downtown specific plan projects. Palo Alto's been doing it. City of Berkeley in the East Bay has been doing it for some of its projects in its downtown. Santa Monica down south has been doing kind of case by case. I know San Mateo, the city of, has also done this kind of case by case negotiation. So it's an approach that cities have been taking. In terms of the per square foot approach, as I mentioned, Mountain View for the El Camino Real and the San Antonio precise plans did a charge a flat fee, and it's $20 a square foot in their case. San Francisco does it in terms of their eastern neighborhoods, and San Diego in some select areas uses this kind of per square foot flat fee That's based on a spreadsheet, not an appraisal. And then percent of profit, San Francisco for some of its central South Market area, and Culver City and Cupertino considered it, but didn't adopt it at the end of the day. I don't think they're doing a community benefits program. So those are the basic ways of approaching this in some of the cities that do it. Now, what's unique about what we're proposing is here. This is new. This approach, we think, is more true to what's really going on when you ask for more development. The city is the owner of these development rights that they are granting to the project developer. And so you're asking to be compensated for that. And so it's a different approach, and we give it to you to consider as part of the M2 planning process. Let's see. So if we took a couple projects here, we took one project that was recently done in Menlo Park, and then we took a project in downtown Berkeley to kind of show, if you apply these different methods, what are the results? In terms of the city negotiated some community amenities for its 1020 Alma project. So when you look at the flat fee per square foot a unit, what was negotiated, if you translate it into the method of a flat fee, is about $31 a square foot, with an additional $35 in kind that was negotiated by the city and the developer in that case. In downtown Berkeley, they had a pretty high rate of $100 for a high-rise building. So it was $100 per extra square foot from 75 feet to 120 feet, and then above 120 feet, the developer pays $150 a square foot for the space above 150 feet. And they were kind of basing their thing on the views you get of the bay and the Golden Gate Bridge and things like that. So if you take these same projects and then say, well, what have we done to percent of profit? What percent of the pro forma profit would this be? Well, in the case of Menlo Park's project, it'd be about 17% of the value is cash payment, and then 19% of these built or in-kind community amenities. Berkeley, we don't know because we don't have their spreadsheet to figure it out. Under our Praise FAR approach, we get basically it would reflect about 11% of the project value and 13%, so it's a lower number. Comments, let's see. So the public benefit contribution, really, you can think of it two ways. So here they have cash payment and then in kind. In their case, they created a public plaza space, included electric chargers for cars and a coffee kiosk. And then in Berkeley's case, the project is going to contribute additional non-monetary community benefits, and they've been negotiating that last summer. So that's just an example of how this plays out in two specific projects. So, topic stations, am I done? Okay. So thank you. If you have any questions, come see me in the back here, and I'm happy to answer your questions about what all these numbers and fancy sounding approaches mean when you're looking at community amenities. Thank you.
Thanks, David. All right, so now you have the chance to hear in a little more detail about where the idea of community amenities came from and where the list of community amenities came from. You heard about the affordable housing requirement, what that is based on and how it relates to the income levels in Menlo Park and Belhaven. And you heard about the developer contribution method, where that came from and what some other jurisdictions are using. So that was a lot of information. So we know that you're going to have questions and that you're going to have comments, and that is the real purpose of tonight's meeting, the second real purpose of tonight's meeting. And so what we're going to do in a minute, so don't do it yet, but what we're going to do in a minute is to break out into stations, which will be an opportunity for you to ask your questions of the folks who just presented the information and to give them your comments. So I'm going to tell you where the stations are going to be, what they are, and what input the city is hoping to receive from you tonight. So the first station is community amenities, and it's going to be in the back over there. And Rosie Dudley from PlaceWorks is going to be the main staff person there to answer your questions. At the Community Amenities Station, we are asking, the city is asking a couple of things from you. The first one is, which community amenities are most important to you? So if you remember, I mentioned you got 3 dots each, and you will see that one of the boards lists the community amenities in the order that was ranked by residents. And the city is looking for a little more detail on which ones are important to you. So we would like you to put your dots on the community amenities on that list that are most important to you. So you can put 1 on each of 3, you can put 3 on 1, but you only get 3. The other questions that we're asking about community amenities are, what community amenities do you think should be added to the list? So are there any community amenities that are very important to you that you don't see on the list? And we'd like you to put that information on your comment card, and the folks there will help you tape it up to the wall where that question is. That's right behind Lee. And then the last question for community amenities is, what items are on the list that you think should not be considered community amenities? And many of you will recall that we've heard that several items on this list are actually basic services, and that a number of folks have said they don't think that they should be considered community amenities. So that is a place for you to let the city know what items on the list you think should not be considered community amenities, that they should just be basic services. Okay, that's the Community Amenities Station. The next one is affordable housing. That's going to be in the corner there. And Jim Kogan is going to be the city staff person at that station. The way that the questions are worded here is a little bit different than what the city is actually asking. And the questions that they're asking are on the wall over there. The first one is, what do you think of the proposed 15% affordable housing requirement and the income levels to be provided by bonus level development? So those income levels, I think Charlie said, were low, very low, and extremely low. And then the second question, boy, my eyes are going. Should affordable housing be provided as an amenity for non-residential projects? So what Charlie described in the presentation was the affordable housing requirement for bonus residential projects. And the city wants to know if affordable housing should be provided as an amenity for non-residential projects, if that's one of the possible community amenities. And if you feel the answer is yes, should it be provided anywhere in Menlo Park or just in Bellhaven? Okay, the third station is in the middle there, which is on the method for determining developer contribution, which you just heard David talk about. And what the city would like to know is, what questions or comments do you have about the proposed approach? Okay, so I also have a blank flip chart here for any other comments that you would like to write down and give to the city, and those will be collected and taken into account as part of this process. So again, I forgot to mention that David Shiver will be at the developer contribution station. Okay, so again, city staff and consultants will be there to answer your questions at the stations. 1 second, please. Deanna Chow and Charlie Knox will be floating around. They also may be able to answer your questions. So we will have until about 8 o'clock for you to go to whatever station you want, all 3, however you want to divide your time, and get your questions answered and give your comments.
I have a question about the process.
Yes, absolutely.
How will you be distinguishing between actual residents of Bellhaven versus, a different part of Menlo Park versus a different city versus a nonprofit organization? And the only reason I bring this up is because sometimes at our meetings are particular issues that are definitely, a lot of people rally to support it, but, so I'm just wondering, how are you going to be able to, really look at your data to be able to determine this is a resident versus this is, a whole group of people? To me it matters, but maybe not to you guys.
I'll answer that question from the facilitation perspective, and then it looks like Charlie has an answer from the Connect Menlo process and decision-making perspective. In my view, as a facilitator, if you came to the meeting tonight, you're a stakeholder, and the city wants to hear from you. And I recognize that there are different perspectives from residents, from people who live in other parts of Menlo Park. And my feeling is if you came to this meeting, you feel like this process has an impact on you and you want to contribute. Having said that, I do think that it's very important that residents be heard from. And I think one way to make sure that that happens is on your comment card, you can put that you're a resident, you can put your name if you like, whatever you're comfortable doing. So that's one suggestion I have. And I hear the concern about not wanting outside perspectives to kind of overwhelm the resident perspectives. I know that that's a concern.
Cheryl, the only thing I would add to that is when you put a comment card up, you can actually note on the card what the dots you put on. I would say voted, it's not exactly the right word, but you can say, I'm a Belhaven resident and I put my dots on the following 3 or the following 1. And so then we'll know when we look at the count, we'll have some correlation.
Any other questions about the process? Okay, as I said, so we'll be in breakout groups at the stations, until about 8 o'clock. We'll come back together, and our plan is to adjourn here certainly by 8:30. So again, you have your comment cards, you have your dots. There'll be people at the stations, so please feel free to go wherever you like to the different stations. Thank you. All right. Thanks, everybody, for giving your input at the stations. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask the staff that were at each of the stations to let us know some of the key questions and answers that came up at their station. Here's Rosie. Yeah. So I'm going to start with community amenities, and Rosie will talk about the questions and answers, and then she'll also give you a quick summary of what the dot voting showed.
Thank you. I saw most of you at my station placing dots, and I think the most common question I got was, how can I decide when I only have 3 dots? Which you did well, and most people did note them with R or resident, if you are a resident of Belhaven or of the city. So it's pretty obvious. Some of the amenities here. Some of the amenities were more popular than others at tonight's meeting. Dumbarton Rail here got the most votes, it appears, followed by grocery store, education improvements in Belhaven, high quality affordable housing, job opportunities for residents, and then undergrounding the power lines also got a number of dots. Another key question we received tonight was, how are we going to tie these amenities into existing resources, in particular in regard to job training. There is existing programs, and so how to not duplicate services, but how will the new amenities tie and enhance the city's existing services as opposed to duplicate. And that's a good question. I think we can discuss that. I don't have an answer now, but we should certainly think about that. I think that's it. I didn't get a whole lot of questions from you all. We will be tallying all the new ideas. We had a couple of them voted on in the back, and we also got a lot of response about which of the amenities that are listed here really should be city basic services. And so we'll be noting that in our summary as well. Thanks.
Thanks. So next was David. It looks like you're still writing. Do you need a minute or are you good? Okay. Jim, are you ready? All right, so Jim, we'll talk about affordable housing and the questions and answers that came up at his station.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming out. Debbie mentioned, my name is Jim Kogan. I'm the Housing and Economic Development Manager. At my station, there was a lot of question around the 15% and how we might be able to add to that. And a number of folks asked the question about whether or not 15% was sufficient at the higher level, or if we could just have 15% at the lower level, which leads me to ask you to take out a pen and write down April 26th anywhere. Write it on paper, a napkin, your hand, your neighbor's hand, depending on how well you know them. April 26th is when we are going to be looking at the Nexus study for both residential and commercial property development. It's a study session that will be held at the City Council chambers with the City Council and the Housing Commission. And so that is a great opportunity if you're interested in housing or housing policy to come out and talk about your concerns. There was some question about whether or not affordable housing should be only in this area or spread out throughout the city. The answer from a lot of folks, the direction from a lot of folks was we should have it dispersed throughout the city as much as possible. And so there's some efforts the city is undertaking to get that in downtown and other locations. But other than that, that's a quick summary. I didn't know if anyone had any other thoughts or questions. I know you really want to hear from David because no one likes ending a night with anything other than economics. That's the most fun stuff. It'll be at the City Council chambers at 701 Laurel Street. 7 o'clock. And if you're interested in any other information, feel free to come and grab a card from me, and you can email me, and I'll make sure that you're aware of it.
Thank you, Jim. All right, David, I know David got a lot of really good questions, so here you go.
Very good questions. The first question I got from a few people was, how did you come up with the 50% split between the city and the developer applicant? And so that there's no science to that number. We thought it was a fair kind of 50-50 splitting of the value created by granting extra development rights. We thought that if you went above that, you'd really give a disincentive to the developer to actually construct a project and provide the community amenities that the city wants to get and the residents. If you go too far below 50%, then the city's really not getting necessarily full value for the development rights that they're granting to the developer. So that's something that can be discussed as part of this process, but it's not a scientific number. We thought it was just kind of a common sense number. We got a couple questions saying, well, what's being appraised? What's being appraised is not the whole project. It's really the bonus development square feet being appraised. And it would be a value for, say, residential versus commercial, which here would be mainly office R&D and life sciences. So you're not appraising the actual development project, just the rights to build more density. We had one question saying, well, is there a way to actually capture the ongoing profit of the development over time and not just have a one-time contribution of community amenities? I don't have an answer for that, but it's something for the city and the citizens to consider. Another good question was, well, what would be the competitive impact for Menlo Park if you have this process that effectively might end up with higher costs to buy the development rights here than in a neighboring city? And that's a good question. I think part of the answer there is, well, folks looking for a project to build have to buy land somewhere. So here, they're buying from two places, the landowner and the city in terms of development rights. Whereas in a city like Mountain View, you would be paying the landowner for development rights, and the city, their flat fee. So it's a complicated question, but a very good question to consider. Let's see here. And then there was a question of, well, how does this take into impact what people pay for their land? Because when people buy land, they're anticipating all of the future income that the project will generate to pay for the cost of construction, et cetera. And so the answer to that is that, well, when you're buying land, you'd be really looking at two sources. You're kind of breaking apart that land value into two parts. One goes to the landowner, the other part is the city, because the city owns the development rights. So that's a preliminary answer to that question, but I think all these questions are really good, and there are things we'll be talking more about. We can help with the analysis of them. So thank you.
Thank you, David. So a lot of information, and I wanted to see if there are any key insights, comments, observations, or questions from any of you all that you haven't already heard or had the opportunity to share that you'd like to share for the benefit of the group tonight.
I'm a little curious. You know, each time we have something, we don't know what to do with it, we put it in the parking lot or the garage. Where are those things now? Are they still there?
So you all probably heard the question. A lot of times we have what we call a parking lot for other comments and questions that come up. So for those of you who've been at previous meetings, there are comments and questions that don't relate to the topic at hand necessarily, but they do get captured, and I'm going to ask Deanna to talk about what the city does with that. So all of this information gets transcribed.
Yeah, so all of the information that we receive here that may not fit applicably to one of the topics here, we do transcribe those notes, and we do share them with the appropriate departments. If there is something that we can address more immediately, we can, or it's something that we'll just consider as part of ongoing discussions.
So we never hear from them again. Is that correct?
If there's something that we can address more immediately.
I mean, do we get a yes, a no, or never, or something, a response? Because we never hear about it anymore.
I don't remember all of the parking lot items from the course of the Connect Menlo meetings, but for one example of the affordable housing issue and the rent displacement issue. So that meeting that Jim Kogan talked about is coming out of results from taking that parking lot question about how are we going to deal with displacement in Bellhaven and address it. So the meeting that he described taking place on the 26th that's how we're moving forward with that aspect. And other of the items get addressed by the different divisions.
Because many times they're forgotten. We don't even know what ended up in the parking lot. It would be good each time we have a meeting like this to just address them so we know where we are. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the suggestion, and we will put these in our notes on the parking lot ones do go in our summer notes for the evening.
So that's actually a nice segue into the next steps, where I'll ask Deanna to talk a bit about what happens with the input from this meeting, how folks can view the comments and questions that came out of the meeting, and what the city is planning to do with information. And I really appreciate everybody taking the time to come out today and give your input.
So we'll go to the next slide. So if you have your presentation, or I can just verbally explain them to you. So again, thank you for all your comments this evening. We will be collecting your comments, transcribing them, and then providing them to our General Plan Advisory Committee. That meeting is scheduled for Thursday, April 21st. So not only these comments, but the comments that you've provided along the way at our previous two topic meetings, comments that were provided via email, comments that were provided at our last General Plan Advisory Committee meeting, all of those are being consolidated and summarized so that we have a collection of comments to provide to the General Plan Advisory Committee. What we also will be doing with those is suggesting potential edits to the code. So those are items where we see that there is unanimous support to make a change, and we will be suggesting language revisions to the General Plan Committee. There are also things that may need further evaluation by the committee, so those are questions that we'll be posing to them. And those will be presented again on April 21st. If you think of something that was not written down this evening, we would encourage you to provide your comments by next Monday, March 28th. That will allow staff time to synthesize that information with the other comments that we have received. Certainly, any comments that we do receive after that date will be provided to the General Plan Advisory Committee, but we hope to have more information up front to make those suggested edits. Following the General Plan Advisory Committee meeting, we then will be taking those recommendations and providing suggested changes to the Planning Commission through a study session. That date is targeted, I believe, for May 9th. I don't have the exact date here, but please stay tuned on our webpage. We will be posting that soon. And then concurrently with that timeline, we'll be working and releasing our draft environmental impact report and our draft physical impact analysis. And we hope to then be wrapping up this process in the fall, in the September-October timeframe. So with that, unless there's any questions, thank you again for coming this evening, and we hope to see you at our general plan. Question?
You said general plan will be adopted in the fall. Would that be the time when you'll know what will be happening or what's happening in the M2 area?
Right, so as part of the general plan adoption, we're looking at both the goals, policies, and programs and land use changes, and also proposed zoning regulations. So the development standards that would identify what types of uses could be built, what the design would be, how tall they could be, what the densities would be. There are no associated projects per se with the general plan, so there's no development tied to it, but the change in the general plan and the change in the zoning would allow for future development to occur at these new development standards. So the map that was over here with the zoning, depending upon the approval process, you could see different changes that would allow for the residential use, to allow for more commercial in the neighborhood, to allow for the live-work environment.
When I was at a city council meeting, I think this is something that went to the parking lot, if you will, in terms of the name for the area. I remember a lot of residents spoke about that.
Yes.
So I wanted to find out what the status is. I haven't heard anything since that.
Yes, the name has just, we generically are now not calling it the Bayfront area. It's just referring to the existing zoning designation. We're calling it generically the M2 area. You will see in the EIR, I believe there was discussion at that point, since there were some advancements on the EIR, it may still be referring to the Bayfront area in the document, but elsewhere we're calling it just the M2 area.
I get a little confused on the amenities because it seems like there would be basic amenities that all of them are part of the enjoy. Town that living here, I see different standards apply. So I have a hard time answering that question. Bus shelter is not this one. I don't understand why that's in one area, but exactly the same thing. Not here, and there are a number of other things, the library, or safety of the roads. So how do we know what the city of Menlo Park regards as a basic amenity that they want all of their residents to enjoy?
That's a good question. I don't know if there's a direct answer. on what a basic city service would be. So the question, I will repeat it, is the difference between what is a community amenity versus what is considered a basic city service.
So I think the kind of the working definition would be like a city operation and maintenance type activity, like paving a street or cleaning the storm drains or making sure the toilet's flush and the water is clean. So we had a lot, and this really came up because we had a lot of comments during this 2 years where people were looking at amenities. I'm sorry, that's the question.
No, I just said.
Oh, city manager? Yes? Okay. Oh, certainly. Alex, they just,
You get it straight from them.
I think, so can I repeat the question? So the question is, what constitutes a basic city service? Is that correct?
Yeah. I can't remember what I said. Yeah. I'm confused on why we're being asked today what amenities that in other areas of the city, I realize are sort of basic. And yet why would the money that we use for something that's truly amenities be used for things that I think are basic, like a library that really serves the resident, a pool that's not closed on the weekends, bus shelters, safe bicycle lanes. I mean, to me, those are basic. And I see them in other areas of the park. So why aren't they here? Why aren't they here? So if I saw, I've never once seen a tree on my street. We used to park on the street when I lived in downtown Oak Park, so it's just kind of confusing to me what that was.
Sure, let me try to answer this question. My name is Alex McIntyre, by the way, and I'm the city manager of Menlo Park, and I'm pleased to be here tonight. Didn't know I was going to be asked this question, but I'm happy to stab at it. So, basic services, to your point, really are those services that are sort of funded by the tax bases of the tax base of the city, and things such as a pool, a library, tree trimming, I think you said, street cleaning, storm gutter clearing, patrols in the streets for cops. The list goes on. Those are sort of fundamental basic services, and I guess what I'm hearing you say is you're seeing a difference in services in I assume Belhaven is the neighborhood you're talking about versus the other parts of the city. One of the things we talk about a lot at the staff level is we do have 2 pools, but we really have one pool that's meant to be used citywide, and we happen to have a second pool in Belhaven. And that second pool, we try to program it, and we are programming it much more than we ever have before, but we don't want to open up a pool and have no one show up to it. So we're trying to have the pool, as an example, be provided where the demand occurs. And right now, we're hearing different demands for the pool. That's just a random example. I think I heard somebody suggest that perhaps street sweeping, was not as high quality here, perhaps, as they perhaps have seen in other parts of the city. But we're actually looking into that, because that was the first time I'd ever heard that complaint made. So again, if we don't know that things are not being done in a manner consistent citywide, we need to know about that. And those are the things we need to hear. So I think basic services, to your definition, are just those, the ones that the community expects and demands and pays for, and through their taxes. And again, the pool's a unique example, and the library's a unique example, because those are 2 services we provide that are duplicated in the city. We have a
Got a lower literacy rate.
pardon?
Lower literacy.
Correct.
Got a gridlock, literally.
Correct.
Twice a day.
Correct.
That's, it's not feasible to expect families to go to the So, as we continue to approve projects, when the traffic gets any worse, it's just not possible to use those services that are on the other side.
Right, and one of the arguments I've been making with some of the developers is if there's this perception, real or perceived, if there's this reality, real or perceived, that the neighborhood feels trapped in their neighborhood and they can't get out, if they're going to be trapped in a neighborhood, let's make sure that neighborhood is providing all the amenities and services that if you're going to get trapped, at least you're going to enjoy the neighborhood you're in. Beautification, the kinds of services you're talking about, some of the retail services that have been asked for as well. We need to make sure that those exist so that if you are feeling trapped, that you're comfortable where you are.
My question is, where are the people who are going to work in those pleasurable places like the restaurants or you know, the dry cleaners, wherever you can go hang out, the library. Where are those people going to live if there's not affordable housing in the area? Because they're going to have to pay for adding to the Travis Avenue.
So your premise then is that there's no affordable housing. I don't know if that there is or isn't affordable housing. Housing affordability will continue to be a challenge region-wide. I mean, we can't fix region-wide housing affordability. We can certainly address it locally, though, to the extent that we have any controls. And that's what I think Jim Cogan was talking about with his group is, you know, what levels of affordable housing do we introduce to this side of town?
All right, thank you, Alex, for taking the time to answer those questions, and thank you for everyone for raising those. Those are really important questions. The community amenities one, I just want to remind people, gets to the question that the city was asking. I know it can be a fine line, but clearly there's a sentiment that there are some items that people on the community amenities list that people feel like are basic services. And so the city does want to hear from you, as Alex said. If there are problems with services currently, you can let the city know, as well as put on that list the question about what items on the list should not be considered community amenities. If you have things that you feel shouldn't be considered community amenities, make sure you add that to the list. And you can do that over the next few minutes. All right, I also wanted to point out, I was made aware that we ran out of copies of the PowerPoint presentation, so there's a sign up here if you would like to get the presentation emailed to you. And if you would like to get it in some other way, mailed to you or something else, you could also let Yesenia know. Okay, thanks everyone again for taking the time and coming out here tonight.
Pretty good.